was called Gertrude Corinne Fountain. And somehow she got out of the Bahamas, even though the airport was on lockdown, and she went to the American Federation of Labor and gave a major speech on behalf of the general strike in Nassau. So they're just wonderful pieces of Bahamian history that I'm really finding out about. And what I've also noticed is the role of women in all of these movements, including the 1942 Burma Road riots and our role in the contract, and moving right up to 1958. There were really stellar, fierce women during the 1958 labor, the labor movement, which in part was anchored by this general strike of 1958. People like Marion Stewart, Mildred Moxie, Hilda Ferguson, just many, many unsung heroines of the labor movement. All right, so Sir Allan Lennox Boyd comes to the Bahamas in April of 1958. He's actually met by a demonstration of the women's suffrage movement, and there's a picture of that which I'll show you in a minute. And he meets with the major stakeholders, all the trade unions and the United Bahamian Party and the Progressive Liberal Party persons. And he gives the women's suffrage movement 15 minutes of his time. He's here for an entire week, and they get 15 minutes of his time. And during that time, they present to him, there was a demonstration, as I said, but they present to him a petition of almost 3,000 signatures to show the demand for the right for women to vote. I have that petition too, which I'm going to pass around.
Could you give us some idea of the population of the Bahamas at the time?
In one of their documents they have that. I think 100-some thousand, about 54,000 were women.
I'll start over here.
That is a copy of the petition that was presented to Sir Allan Lennox Boyd and later tabled in Parliament in Nassau in December of 1958. So let me just take you to page 50, a copy of that you have there. It starts page 34. I think it's the very first page that you see. For some reason, when it was put together in numbers, but the numbers don't say anything. Page 34, everybody can see a copy of that? All right, so down below, starting with Mr. Cash, presented, yes? This is the petition that was presented to Sir Allan Lennox Boyd, some 3,000 votes, 3,000 signatures almost. It was later tabled in the Bahamian Parliament on the 24th of November 1958. And in that petition, you'll see names like Timothy McCartney, Sir Clement Maynard is there, Charles Rodriguez, Carl Bethel. Many men signed that. It's a very interesting petition because what the women did there was they actually went to some of the family islands. You'll also see signatures from Exuma, Cat Island, Long Island. It's mind-boggling to me that they got these signatures at that time, just given the logistics of making it happen. And you can also see different communities there. There are some people who are not literate, and so there's an X there, or what they do is they get one person to actually write all their names out. I just found it a very interesting document, and a lot of analysis. I'm not really analyzing anything now, I'm really just putting it forward, but it's something I really want to sit down and do, is really do an analysis of this whole movement and the documents and what they meant and the significance of them. So 1958, Sir Allan Lennox Boyd comes, they show him that. He then makes recommendations to the House of Commons three main recommendations. And what I should have said from a very long time ago, and I'm sorry, is that up to this point, we have what's called limited male franchise, all right? Which means that men could vote who were British subjects, who were 21 years and over, who owned property and or a company. So we had what was called plural voting up until this point. So Allan Lennox Boyd looks at all of this and makes recommendations along these lines. One, he felt very strongly that there should be a more modern labor legislation. Two, that we should do away with the company vote, and that was done. And three, that the plural vote should be reduced to 2, which meant that You could vote residentially if you were a man, 21 years and over, and those qualifications. You could vote residentially. You could also vote if you had one more piece of property in one other area. So you were allowed 2 votes. Is that clear? One residential and one if you had property somewhere else, not if you had, so before that, if you had 10 pieces of property, you could have voted that many times. Or if you had 10 companies, there was an overall plural vote. All right, so he made those recommendations. What he did not recommend was that women be given the right to vote. He recommended universal male suffrage with those qualifications that I told you about, but nothing to do with women. So the women were not pleased with that, and because they were the ones who were actually demonstrating and moving for the suffrage to happen. So they then tabled that document with Sir Gerald Cash in December of 1958. Again, it seemed to have just died in committee. Not much came of it in terms of it being acted on for further legislation. All right, moving along very quickly here. In January of 1959, Dame Dr. Doris Johnson, who came home in 1958 in between her studies, she joined the suffrage movement, the official suffrage movement, in 1958. All right, and she quickly became the leading spokesperson for the suffrage movement. Huge, partly because of her higher education. She was eloquent, she was fearless, she was politically connected outside of the Bahamas. She belonged to many international women's organizations. She was politically savvy, and she was seen as a leader who could actually represent the women in a more militant kind of way. And so she brought a huge degree of militancy to the women's suffrage movement. So when she comes home, they see her clearly as a leader, and they say to her, it's now time for us to present our own case to Parliament. We've had 2 petitions, we've had demonstrations, and let's do it for ourselves. So they draft a wonderful speech, I think. I think all children should actually know this speech and know what it says. And on January 19th, 1959, they go to Parliament. It's partly a demonstration outside, and women assemble inside, and they ask they ask Parliament if she could make this presentation after they have had their formal, after they've done their formal work. And the response basically was that there's no precedent for a woman presenting a petition in Parliament, and it's not going to happen right now. I think Sir Stafford Sand was also known to have said women will get the suffrage over his dead body. He did live beyond 62, 1962, when we voted for the first time. And so what was recommended at this point was that the women Doris Johnson could give this petition, present this petition, informally in the Magistrates' Court, Magistrate Maxwell Thompson's court, after the formal session of Parliament. So the parliamentarians retired to the Magistrates' Court, and it was there, in the presence of a crowd of women, inside and outside, that she gave this speech. And you have that speech there. I copied it. It looks something like this. And I just want us to read just a couple of paragraphs from it, just so that you can see, get a sense, a flavor of what they were saying, and then clearly you can take it home and read it. All right, so it starts on page 178. See if you can find something that says 178, looking something like this. And if somebody could just come up and just come, and anybody who's wanting to read would just come up and read this, it would be really fabulous. Thank you, Michelle. We're going to read the first 4 paragraphs. Okay, starting, you want to read the whole thing, right? Starting right here, and let's go to there. Okay, I'm going to tell you right now.
I know. Hughes?
No. I really should do this.
Oh.
I should know better. It's from